We are back once again with Erika Brown, the publisher and editor of The Cricket, coming to us from her office in downtown Manchester by the Sea. How are you, Erika?
Hey, Kory.
Are things a little quieter these days in your neck of the woods?
So nice. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. As a matter of fact, last night I slept like I was dead. It was
Yeah,
just,
yeah. There's a
is
lot
that a
going
phrase?
on.
My godmother used to say that, but I don't know if that's actually a phrase.
No, I've heard that. That's you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
So I guess like the big story this week, I suppose, centers around Central Street.
Ah, yes, it does. Funny you should say it that way. Yeah, the Central Street culvert, which is essentially very similar to Essex. You know how Essex has the causeway that has the little culvert in the bridge and it's
Yeah.
always flooding and always in trouble? Well, this is the same thing. We've got a culvert. It's the Central Street culvert and it cuts downtown Manchester in two. It's very, very small, but very, very important when it comes to vehicular traffic, emergency traffic, and the like. And I think the culvert was built in 1900, something like that. It's very old, sort of historic. It's very narrow. It doesn't look like it's very important, but it's incredibly important, and not because it for vehicular traffic, although that should be important enough. It's actually really important because underneath this little culvert, which is Sawmill Brook, it's kind of the beginning of Sawmill Brook or the end of Sawmill Brook. It's where Sawmill Brook feeds out into the ocean, so it's the end. So we're talking Elm Street, School Street, Brook Street. Like these are all things that kind of back up to Sawmill Brook. And there's a lot of flooding that's happened because this culvert has a very small, narrow opening. The reason it's important is because also in that narrow opening is an electric trunk feed to all of Cape Ann.
Oh, right.
So it's got a lot of utilities that run under it. It also has other utilities that are kind of next to it that won't be kind of disturbed, but it shows you how this passageway is important. It's also got a gas feed, a cable feed, sort of National Grid, Xfinity, Comcast, and then I also think the sewer goes underneath it. So it's like really important.
Mm.
So what they're going to do, they've needed to do this for decades and they got grants. And here, I'm sorry, I've been talking around it. We had a lot of people from big state and national leaders who came to Manchester last week to help the town announce the fact that it was one of two recipients of for Manchester, $1.5 million grant to replace the culvert. That work is going to happen next fall. So we're talking fall 2024. So it's not going to happen for a long time, but it's going to be 6 months of inconvenience. But this was in addition to a $4.5 million federal grant as well. So it's a $7 million project, but 6 million has come in from grants. And I guess the real hero of the day was Greg Federspiel, who's sort of taking, the lead for the town. There's a lot of people, of course, behind him. But we had some big heavy hitters that came in. I'm just going to read them all. We had the director of the National Coastal Zone Management, who was there and she was speaking. Another speaker was Rebecca Tepper. She's the Massachusetts Secretary of Environmental Affairs,
Mm.
a big cabinet position, right? And then Betsy Nicholson is the Northeast Director for NOAA, for the National
Ocean and
Ocean,
Atmosphere
Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency. Is that what it is? Good
Administration.
enough.
I should know that.
They were all there, and so were, of course, all the people from the town, the DPW, Bion Pike, the whole thing. So everybody was there. It was a big kind of win for the town in terms of just securing a lot of grants. And it was really interesting because I, of course, listen with Essex in mind as well. And Essex has had to kind of do a lot of work. They're just off of a year and a year project with their kind of the Causeway Bridge just got
Right.
completed within the last month, I think, right?
Yep.
And that's also because of sea level rise and coastal resilience, this kind of theme of the vulnerability of a coastal community, right? And we're all coastal communities here on Cape Ann. So I was listening to that. But one thing that kind of came through as a theme from like the national people, the ones who have the purse strings, is they said very clearly that Manchester benefited from the fact that Greg Federspiel, our town administrator, has gone through 9 years of engineering studies that we've invested in to prove and to document this need. And because of all of that data, she said, that's the reason why Manchester got one of these pretty special grants. And she also said that there's more that's coming from the federal government in terms of just helping out with resiliency in the face of everything. And Margaret Ferrante was interesting. She brought up all the haze that's been, we've all lived with for the last 3 weeks from the wildfires up in Canada. And she basically said, here you go, we're all interconnected. Something that happens, an environmental injury in one part of the world can actually impact with immediacy and with, a lot all along the East Coast. So she brought that up. It was kind of an interesting thing. It was really good.
Mm. So the plan is for that to move forward, and then in next fall.
Yeah, next fall. And what's going to happen is they're going to cut off the road. It's going to be about 6 months of it being cut off. My impression is that it's not going to be totally cut off. It's not going to be like, yeah, we're cutting it off and we'll see you next spring. It's going to be like intermittent. They'll have closed, open, closed, open, closed, open. So it'll kind of be like that. But they're also going to take a bridge from the harbor master's office probably from Tux Point. Remember Tux Point had that temporary,
Yep.
temporary as in a whole year, I think, a temporary bridge onto the rotunda, or from the rotunda down to I think they're going to use something like that. That's what Chuck Dam was telling me, the head of the DPW. They're going to use that and have that as a pedestrian bridge, and it's going to go almost behind Jack's Barber Shop, which, if you're familiar with this area, so pedestrians are going to be able to walk back and forth. So it's going to be a big impact on the businesses there for sure. But I think it's one of those things where it's got to be done, right? So you just have to figure out how to, mitigate the inconvenience and just hold your breath and get through it.
Yeah, and that time of year too, especially before the ground freezes, if it does in fact freeze that winter. So,
and the other thing, and I kind of reference this, but I think this is kind of important to emphasize, the impact of flooding isn't just about the road, right, or downtown. Behind it, sort of that end of Sawmill Brook, we'll call it, right, is either side of Elm Street. If that floods, there's a lot of residential things back there. Also paralleling School Street, which is one of the main streets to 128. All behind that is in the FEMA 50-year flood zone. So when that floods, that whole side of the street, the water can swell up to that. And then it even goes to Lower Brook Street, which is kind of ends behind the Brook Street Playground, the Coach Field and Memorial School. So it's got a lot of impact for the village and the residents there. So this is going to be a good project for the long-term view of all of those people.
Okay, good points. Okay, and lastly, Erika, we just want to reiterate, we have 2 special town meetings coming up for Manchester and Essex.
Exactly. That's going to be, in Essex, it's going to be a short one because the warrant is only about the FY24 and Manchester Essex Regional School District budget, that compromise budget we talked about last week. And that is going to be on June the 26th. I believe that's a Monday. The June 26th is the right date.
It is.
And that's going to be at Essex Elementary School. And then 2 days later, Manchester's going to have its special town meeting to not only approve present for approval or consideration, I should say, right? Isn't that the right terminology? The district budget, the compromise budget, but also the planning board was already moving ahead on its recodification. They're going to have a couple more elements of the zoning bylaw. They're pretty procedural. We have a lot of details in the paper this week about what those are, but those are also going to be on the warrant as well.
Gotcha. All right. Awesome stuff as always, Erika. Thanks for your time. We'll see you this time next week.
Bye, Kory.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.